Players on the move, of course. So we are on the move right here at the Voice of College Football. But good news for you, we are no longer on the move in regards to when you can find us. That will be every Tuesday at 1 p.m. Eastern time right here at the Voice of College Football on the recruiting channel. So you have found us right here. We will be promoting network wide, and we hope that you will join us. It's all about the transfer portal. It's about high school football recruiting right here on our weekly show, and we'll provide other updates throughout the week. Of course, courtesy LeeAnn Herring. Thanks to her, we have a show. So LeeAnn, thank you so much for being here. You can catch LeeAnn's work on Twitter. We will give you all those destinations here very soon. But LeeAnn is currently the director of recruiting at Rebel Walk. LeeAnn, how you doing today?
Doing good. Trying to avoid this Texas weather. We weren't hit with all the snow. My kids were really excited, hoping they were going to get school off school, and they did. But there was no snow. It's pretty cold, but it's just nice and bright sweater. Now, all our guys out at Houston and Dallas area drive safe because I'm hearing they're getting tons of snow and they're having fun today. College football is in the books for the season, but just because college football is officially on the books, and I'm sure Mark is happy with that Ohio State win down to the wire. The Irish came back, but still, nonetheless, that Ryan Day proved in a lot of ways that building the roster correctly and investment, especially building from the transfer portal. Ohio State and Notre Dame were two teams this past season that really utilized the transfer portal to be able to build this roster. And it definitely showed, accenting, of course, the big time playmakers that they brought in. But again, just because college football is officially on the books doesn't mean there's still not a lot going on. There's definitely been plenty of action. We're going to get you updated on the portal. Also, as far as high school recruiting, if you guys probably have noticed, you're following your favorite team. You're seeing all those signature pictures with those coaches and assistants that are making visits to their high schools, to making in-home visits. So it's a very busy time right now for the coaches as many offers are going on, as well as, like I said, seeing. So we're going to be keeping up with that. But two big events happened on the high school circuit. We're going to be talking about, of course, in Honolulu this past weekend. The Polynesian Bowl was the last action for some of these 2025 signees as they jump on one plane to head to another. Some of these guys will be starting campus, their first college football classes today. But wrapped up their career over at the Polynesian Bowl, the last of the All-American circuit games for our 2025 guys. And of course, we got to see our 2025 signees. And then something we talked a lot about, and we're definitely going to bring more coverage that Mark and I have kind of mentioned, is the 7-on-7 circuit this weekend. Was the big opening weekend for Battle 7-on-7. They're one of the bigger companies that will be with following the season, with a lot of the major playmakers, a lot of the guys that you've been hearing us talk about. Many were on a plane from the Polynesian Bowl in Honolulu to make it down to South Florida and Miami this weekend. So again, we have some of the playmakers to watch from the big opening weekend down in Miami with Battle 7-on-7. And we also have a great guest today. Going to be talking a little bit about NC State football and rebuilding in the secondary and hitting some portal news.
So absolutely. LeeAnn and I have gotten together for 18 of these shows already, and much of our discussion is centered around NC State in recent weeks. We got Corey Smith on the line from 247 Sports. Pack Pride is where you can catch Corey's work on a regular basis. Corey, we appreciate you stopping by.
Yes, I appreciate you guys having me on.
Absolutely. So I hate to open the discussion like this, Corey, but we're actually going to focus on another team because you might have some, not necessarily intel, but an interesting perspective on what's happening with your arch rival, because it has shaken up the college football world in regards to Bill Belichick coming to the college ranks, taking over North Carolina. And of course, he's got to form a coaching staff, got to put that together. He's new to the transfer portal. He's making additions like everyone else is. So what's the NC State perspective right now on what's happening over in Chapel Hill?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to see what all's taking place there. You know, a lot is unfolding for his staff right now, trying to put that together, and still yet to sign the contract. So that's kind of the interesting aspect that a lot of people are bringing up right now is there's still no contract necessarily signed in place, things along those lines for UNC there. But, and Bill Belichick still apparently being courted by NFL teams. Tom Brady even, saying that he reached out to him as the owner of the Raiders. So it's an interesting aspect in the sense that, if teams wanted to get him right now, if that contract is signed, it's $10 million for a buyout to be able to bring him over to the NFL side of things again. But once June 1st passes, if a team is still, hunting for a coach at that point, I'm interested to see if there's still a team available at that time that's looking for somebody. It's $1 million buyout at that point. You'd lose $9 million off of that. You'd be, it'd be a lot less money to be able to buy him out at that point. So I'm interested to see if that ends up happening. But, on the recruiting trail as of right now, there hasn't been any real, big splashes made by UNC. Obviously, getting Bryce Baker in the 2025 class and being able to land him and keep him signed to this class was huge, especially given the fact that, you had your starter from last year enter the transfer portal at quarterback. So they need to be able to kind of figure out that position. That was something that, over the last, 4 or 5 years, they've been able to do, with the exception of this past season. Obviously, having 2 NFL quarterbacks over the course of a 5-year span with Drake May and previously Sam Howell was huge for what UNC was able to build. But unfortunately, they were never able to reach that next stage with Mac Brown, be able to get to, the upper echelon of college football. So are they able to do that under Bill Belichick with a pro-style system? And now the question becomes the same thing that it was with Bill Belichick prior to this, was how long is he going to be there? Is he ever going to actually, coach a college football game? Because, with all this, NFL stuff circling, yes, it can be kind of a joking matter right now, but, come the next few weeks, if the Raiders don't get the guy that they wanted, which obviously they wanted Ben Johnson, he ends up going to the Bears. If they don't hit on some of the guys they wanted, how willing are they to, or how willing is, somebody like Jerry Jones to buy out a $10 million contract and just say, screw it, we'll bring in our guy that we want. So all of those things are kind of in the forefront for UNC as well.
Some younger folks may not be aware that way back when, Bill Belichick once took the podium as the head coach of the New York Jets, and about 2 days later said,
I'm
"No,
good.
not going to take the job."
Yep.
So he's done it before.
Mm-hmm.
And so before we move on, again, I'm just fascinated by Belichick and obviously your perspective and the fans' perspective. I'm sure there were memes flying all over the place from NC State fans kind of making fun of his age and just his personality or lack thereof and so forth, and him coming from the NFL ranks. And then, they go from one old timer to another. Just in terms of, I think of Herman Edwards, and nobody's going to put Herm Edwards in the same sentence as Bill Belichick in regards to what they accomplished, but same situation. Career NFL guy, never touched college football since way back when, comes back to the game. Initial results for Herm Edwards were actually decent, but then he faltered. And just thoughts about Bill Belichick adjusting not just to college football, but the new age college football, which in a sense kind of reflects the NFL.
Yeah, and if you're looking at what Arizona State has been able to do since losing Herm Edwards, obviously they made it back to the college football playoff this past year, and it was primarily with players they added in the transfer portal, but also players that Herm Edwards was able to go out there and recruit and sell on. Hey, I'm going to get you to the NFL. That's the hope here, is that for a guy like Bill Belichick, even if he only coaches until he's 74 years old, which would be 2 years from now. If he only coaches till then, can you build the groundwork for what the future can be for this program? A lot of people kind of talking about the fact that he hired Steve Belichick, his son, to be the defensive coordinator for this program. When he leaves, the thought process is, all right, Steve Belichick is going to take over. Is that the splashy hire that you want to make after Bill Belichick? Is that laying the groundwork for him, or is it laying the groundwork for, another upstart, offensive coordinator that we're not talking about, similar to what you had with Kenny Dillingham coming over and taking over that program and now being, where they are. So it's going to be interesting to see what the next few years hold for UNC, because they've obviously bought in. They've even said, hey, we're going to pay upwards of $20 million for NIL, for a roster each year. And that's kind of the baseline of what Ohio State did this past year. They went out, put $20 million into their roster between transfer portal recruits and guys that they were retaining. Is that what UNC is really going to do? Are they going to go all in on football? And because of the fact that, yes, they have the brand, but in this current age of college football, you have to be able to, or college athletics as a whole, you have to be good at football in order to be able to survive. And being in the ACC for NC State, UNC, Duke, and everybody associated with the ACC right now, your football has to be in order to be able to compete to get to potentially another conference if something happens to the ACC as well. So all of that is at the forefront for UNC right now too.
Corey, we appreciate the perspective on UNC. Enough of them. All right, we got you here to talk NC State. Here we go. You didn't expect a grilling on North Carolina football probably when you jumped on, but we appreciate you
just
being
about
here.
Every time we talk college football here recently, man, it's been the Bill Belichick thing is in another stratosphere. But yeah, obviously NC State football has been doing a lot of things this offseason too to try to build upon what they've already done and try to keep this winning streak against UNC alive too.
LeeAnn and I had a discussion a couple consecutive days a few weeks ago about NC State's secondary in particular. Seemed to just be a raid, an exit door for the secondary, and then obviously a change in the defensive coordinator staff. Your thoughts about what happened there? Anything in particular? Is there a link there? What can we draw from that, and how significant are these losses?
Yeah, I mean, those were pretty massive losses. Obviously, 3 of them being starters for NC State this past year. Brandon Cisse, Tamarcus Cooley, I would probably say was the biggest loss just because of what he was capable of doing. And obviously now going to the SEC for both of them, some money had it, was an influencing factor there, obviously, for both of them. The fact that you enter the portal and you're immediately courted by all these SEC programs, those were 2 of the biggest losses. And then, when you talk about the back end of the defense too, Devin Boykin, a guy that, back in 2023 was probably one of their best playmakers right before the Pop-Tarts Bowl. He tears his ACL. He's out for the rest of the season. He's not going to be back the entire 2024 campaign. So you're getting, the hope was he comes back this upcoming year and he's that starter again. Bishop Fitzgerald, another guy that ultimately ended up going to USC. Those 2 were expected to be the back end of this, the secondary and be the strength of what this team was hoping to kind of build upon when you got a DJ Elliott. But, you lose all those guys. And I forgot to mention Devin Boykin goes to Indiana. All 4 of those players for NC State, like I said, your hope was that they would be able to kind of secure the back end of this defense. You go out, you add a Jaren Sensabaugh that was, comes over from Mizzou, a guy that has 4 years remaining. So you're hoping to kind of build upon what he was able to do. And to me, the thought process with him is you get a young player similar to Tamarcus Cooley this past year that they got. And Tamarcus Cooley, the expectation was, all right, in 2-3 years, he'll be the starter. He'll be the guy. He became the guy in year 1. Their hope is that Jaren Sensabaugh, along with Jamel Johnson, a guy that comes over at the cornerback position, very experienced player from Temple. He comes over, and you're hoping that one of those 2 can kind of be that starter opposite Devon Marshall that they had coming back from this past year or 2. And then the back end of this defense, now you have Jeremiah Johnson that you bring over from Georgia State, the guy that was all Sun Belt the last 2 years that they're hoping they can kind of build upon there. And those all be pieces that are now, veteran members of this team, but also you get some guys back that, like I said, Devon Marshall that you have back, and you move away a little bit from the nickel spot. So you don't need 5 DBs out there on a constant basis. So your hope is that those guys can fill those losses that you had. But going back to what you said beforehand, the link between those guys too, Freddie Autry-Lindsey was one that was kind of keeping them there throughout December. The thought process was he would potentially take over as the defensive coordinator. He didn't ultimately, and ended up not getting a co-defensive coordinator job. He ends up leaving to take over the full-time position at Sam Houston State. So right once all 4 of those guys found out we're not going to have our guy, as far as our DBs coach is concerned in the back end there, they all kind of said, hey, we're going to all enter the transfer portal at the same time. And like I said, there's the NIL influence as well. So that plays a little bit of a factor. When you talk about guys going to the SEC, that's probably playing a pretty major factor too, and USC as well for Bishop Fitzgerald too.
Corey Smith dropping by to break down some NC State football for us. We appreciate Corey. You can see his links that we'll provide here on the banner to both his personal X account, and then, of course, Pack Pride is the place to be for 247 Sports on NC State athletics. I'm seeing 10 additions that you've run down many of those and 17 losses through the transfer portal. Casey Concepcion is another guy that LeeAnn and I talked about extensively because once he hit the portal, we were both like, this is one of the top guys in the nation, a guy that is kind of a jack of all trades, can line up anywhere, actually carries the football more than just about any wide receiver in the country. That obviously was a major loss.
Yeah, I mean, Casey was a guy that, this past offseason, going into the 2024 season, they re-signed him and was the largest NIL contract they had signed to that point. The financials are kept private, things along those lines, but that was the staple of what they were going to build around was Casey Concepcion's coming back. They're going to get Grayson McCall at quarterback, and that's a guy that's a veteran presence. Then they'll add a Jordan Waters. Unfortunately, those three highest paid guys that you had come in, as far as the transfer portal was concerned on offense, none of them really panned out. Jordan Waters coming over from Duke had one of his lowest production years of his entire career. And then you had, as we said, Grayson McCall, obviously the injury that he went through, and then the season-ending injury that he went through, or the career-ending, basically, to that point. And then, as we mentioned, Casey Concepcion, somebody that, was, like you said, a jack of all trades, a guy you can line up in the backfield, a guy that you can run off jet sweeps, obviously a great short yardage receiver that can turn it into huge gains, but he didn't really kind of fit into the offense this past season for whatever reason. Teams, keyed in on him and said, we're going to take him away and force you to do anything else in this offense. And State was able to do that with Justin Jolie. They were able to figure out ways to get Hollywood Smothers kind of going, but not to say that Concepcion just kind of, phased out of the offense, but it did seem like midway through the season, he kind of, not to say gave up on the team, but, the confidence wasn't there for him. It wasn't like he kind of had a buy-in midway through the season. So I think going somewhere where he won't be the focal point on every single snap, going to a Texas A&M where you have the opportunity to have a lot of guys around you that were, number one overall prospects at wide receiver and guys that were former 5-stars. He comes in and it's kind of like, all right, you're another, 4-star in this offense. You're another guy that can create, but he is a big time playmaker once you get him into open space, somebody that can create and somebody that, his first year at NC State broke a ton of tackles, had a ton of yards and 10 touchdowns that season. That's why he was named ACC Freshman of the Year. I would love to see him get back to that, but I don't think it was going to happen in NC State's system this upcoming year. So it was something that was best for both sides from an NIL standpoint for NC State, because you needed to be able to build a roster around CJ Bailey that you have coming back next year. You weren't going to be able to do that if you were going to increase the pay or pay the same for a guy like Casey Concepcion going into this year.
Corey, thank you.
I'm just going to let me chime in real quick. I know that you were going to talk a little bit. We talked so much in the focus about, building rosters, and a lot of the teams we know now, the investment becomes to the transfer portal. But what kind of things as far as the 2026 class, as far as signees, commits, and all that, is NC State looking to? Where is their kind of focus and shift, and how much are they relying on, the 2026, 2027, the high school recruiting, pool of athletes to be able to build their roster this offseason?
Yeah, 2026 is still, something that NC State is working on, because as of right now, they don't have a ton in the 2026 class. But as far as recruiting wise, yeah, the change to 105 scholarships has kind of opened things up as well, because right now NC State is sitting at about 85, 86. They still haven't upped all the way to 105, but they put a little bit more focus on the 2025 class this past year. And as far as 2026 is concerned, they're looking still, for all, basically every single position to this point. But there are several guys in that class that NC State is really looking towards trying to get, to bring in. Obviously with the quarterback position, things along those lines, they still need to be able to add. They have Jacob Smith in the class, but the hope is to still potentially be able to add somebody if, a Will Wilson in the 2025 class doesn't pan out, or they don't feel comfortable there. They could still look at quarterback. But Brady Sakowitz is another one, as you're seeing there on the screen. offensive tackle, big body guy that they're looking at, or they have committed in this class, but they're still looking to build a lot. They'd love to be able to get, as far as offensive line is concerned, try to still get 5 guys in this class, if not 4. But, there has been a shift for NC State to looking at the transfer portal and looking at JUCO players. They've had a lot of success with JUCO players and building younger transfer portal players as well. And they've always looked, when it comes to that, when it comes to the class, they've always looked at in-state players before they really look outside of the state of North Carolina too. So, yeah, there's a lot of different guys. Obviously, younger players that they've looked at, Faison Brandon, Javon Gilmore, both going to the SEC in terms of quarterback position. But, they're looking for just about everybody across the board for 2026. And then, the 2027 class has a guy named by the name of Gunnar Rivers. They would love to be able to really be in the mix for. They were Gunnar Rivers' first offer. Obviously, the son of Philip Rivers, a guy that is on the cusp of being a 5-star quarterback in the 2027 class. And obviously, he's gotten recent offers. I believe Auburn was a recent offer, and then Miami he got an offer from as well. So there's a few big hitters that are already talking to him. But for NC State, you're kind of hoping that, all right, 2027 class, if we get CJ Bailey through the next 2 years, he becomes an NFL caliber quarterback, which they're hoping for. You look towards the future, and hey, maybe Gunnar Rivers truly is that guy for NC State if they can be able to put together all the things they want to over the next couple of years.
Now, I saw Faison Brandon, just recently at the Navy All-American Bowl. I mean, when you're sitting with those guys, I always tell Mark, there's always that one, and sure enough, and then like I said, when I found out he's from Grimsley, North Carolina, I mean, that kid is just accurate. Obviously, like you said, he's heading to Tennessee, but do you think that despite his commitment to Tennessee, that NC State would still continue to recruit him? I know that's a lot of these cases, but I mean, when you got that kind of in-state talent, that kind of arm that he has, I mean, he's one of those guys. When I was telling Mark, I listen for how when they're passing and how hard that ball hits, and I mean, he's just so accurate when you hear him. And like I said, he's a North Carolina product, and a lot of times, like you said, a lot of schools have kind of shifted. Still recruiting their in-state talent, but like you said, NC State has utilized their in-state talent to help build their roster. So do you think that they will continue to recruit someone like Faison Brandon, despite him being committed to Tennessee, or do you think that they're all in with Rivers right now?
Oh yeah, well, I mean, with Faison, Rivers in the 2027 class, so they're obviously working on him for the future. And then with Jacob Smith already committed in the 2026 class, you can kind of play with house money a little bit, because you can say, hey, we're going to continue recruiting a guy like Faison Brandon. Javon Gilmore is another one down in Gaffney, South Carolina, that they've talked to as well. But Faison is somebody that they really they brought in for multiple unofficial visits, not an official visit, but multiple unofficial visits, and he's really like the system. Obviously, for NC State, you're shifting to Kurt Roper being the now offensive coordinator, a guy that has been the quarterback's coach for multiple years and has recruited all these guys as well. So Faison Brandon, it's somebody that they're going to continue to talk to. And even if you can't get him to flip in the 2026 class, you've seen over the last few years, obviously a guy like Hollywood Smothers coming back from Oklahoma, somebody that NC State recruited really hard out of the recruited really hard in his class. Noah Rogers coming from Ohio State. They're looking at all these guys as maybe a bounce back. All right. He goes to Tennessee, finds out he doesn't become the starter, which I highly doubt in this sense. He's the number 1 overall player in the country, number 1 overall quarterback, number 1 player in the state of North Carolina. There's a reason for all that. And they're kind of building towards, all right, we've got multiple guys, but Faison is probably going to be the guy once he arrives on campus at Tennessee. If you don't end up getting him in the first class, say something, ends up happening. Tennessee gets a guy out of the portal to say, hey, Faison, we're going to sit you for the first year. He doesn't like that. You end up going somewhere else. Well, NC State would love to be that bounce back, that team that, hey, you saw it this past year, the kid that from Cal that ended up going to another program. He decommits from there because they got somebody out of the transfer portal and goes back to Cal. For NC State, you want to keep recruiting a kid like that, because you just never know what could end up happening, and getting a talent a kid that talented at the quarterback position, that could be a game changer for any program in the country.
Great stuff. Corey Smith from Pack Pride 247 Sports. I had a quarterback question, but I think you covered all the bases with obviously the Grayson McCall situation's unfortunate, one of the most prolific passers in recent college football history. And then CJ Bailey steps in, 17 TDs, 10 picks. So he will be the guy this year.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yes, that was, look, man, when we talked about NIL and contracts and things along those lines, of course, a lot of these things stay private, at least for some programs. But, when it comes to NC State, that was the focal point going into the offseason was, all right, last offseason, it was, all right, we've got to keep Casey Concepcion and we'll go get a quarterback from the portal. This offseason, a lot of their time was spent with CJ Bailey. All right, we've got to be able to retain him for this upcoming year and then retain the talent around him. You lose Casey Concepcion, but you get Noah Rogers back. You get Takari Collins back. You get Justin Jolie, one of the best tight ends, I felt like, in the country this past year, but didn't get the recognition for whatever reason. That a lot of that was because he was playing for a team that didn't accomplish much. But Justin Jolie was one of the better pass catchers in the country this past season. They get him back, and then you build around him with keeping Hollywood Smothers, with keeping Kendrick Raphael, and now going out in the portal and adding, we talked about the fact that last offseason was spent for NC State adding, as many weapons as you could around Grayson McCall and eventually CJ Bailey. They keep all those weapons. Now this offseason was spent, all right, build on the offensive line. Make this offensive line so good that you have the opportunity for CJ Bailey to sit back there and pick apart defenses. They go out, they get a Teague Anderson, a guy that was a starter from Utah State. They go out and they get multiple guys that could be, at the right guard or center position for NC State. Brock Stooks coming over from NCA&T, Jalen Grant coming over from Purdue. So you look at all these additions they've made this offseason. It was just retain the talent that you have and then build on this because you could have a much better offensive line. And that's exactly what they've done. It may not be sexy. It may be listed as one of the bottom, in the ACC, according to 24/7 and some others, but they've gone out and they've added positions of absolute need to be able to build around CJ Bailey. And you have to be able to do that when you don't have the NIL funds of an Ohio State or a Ole Miss or, Texas or any of these other programs that we're talking about, being able to just go out and pluck whoever they want to. For NC State, you have to be smart about it, and that's exactly what they've done this offseason.
All right, NC State looking to bounce back with maybe some players bouncing back to them through the transfer portal and looking to bounce back on the field, 6-7 following a bowl loss and get back in that 9-win range that Dave Doran had them at a few times here in the last few seasons. Corey Smith, Pack Pride. Corey, we appreciate you stopping by. We encourage everyone to check out Corey's work there at 247 Sports.
Thank you guys for having me.
Thanks,
for
Corey.
stopping by.
All right, that was a really good run through on NC State and North Carolina.
Well, it really was. And that I was you could probably see my face light up when he was talking about rebuilding the offensive line. Again, we saw so many times this season across the conference that the offensive line, we've seen it through the portal, just how much the stock has risen for the position of offensive and defensive linemen, because like Corey mentioned right there, you want to build on, like you said, it's not something sexy. It's not something, the most highly sought out, but it gets the job done. Like, that I'm about to say, you need a line that can stand on business. And it's great to see a team like NC State looking to protect its guy like CJ Bailey, like Corey was saying there. They knew that they were going to build around CJ Bailey and be able to invest in, but again, they couldn't get it done without having those guys up front. So again, many teams are facing that problem. And that's something, that's not just something that NC State has faced, is building a roster. And like he mentioned, the biggest issues this year as far as is roster is retaining your roster. Like Corey mentioned, you have your guys, like for NC State it was Casey Concepcion, it was CJ Bailey. Those are the guys that you knew that you were going to throw down the money, the investment for. But also, how do you keep the guys you have? How do you go to the portal? How do you keep your incoming high school guys, your 2025 season? So some really good stuff from Corey as far as, and as even though we're talking about NC State and UNC, that is a topic, Mark, that we've talked about a lot across the board from conference to conference, that big teams with big NIL money and with teams that have to be smart about the way they spend NIL money during the portal. But again, and it just all kind of tied in what Corey touched on about how relationships matter. Because like I said, Faison Brandon, when I saw him, I mean, he caught my eye. I hated to hear he was committed to Tennessee, but of course, all the wheels were turning. How are we going to get him to Ole Miss? How are we going to get him to other places like many places? But he makes a good point. A lot of the times, often when I have conversations with recruits, they're willing to go to different portal programs because, like you said, we'll get you back in the portal. And that's like a lot of things we've seen that some of the high profile 4 and 5-star guys that were highly coveted, coming out of high school. Mark, we've seen what a commodity they've been, coming in the portal because, like you said, they don't find a place, they don't find their fitting. He really alluded to how Casey Concepcion, didn't check out, but he just wasn't a fit. So maybe now that he's at Texas A&M, where he's loaded with a lot of wide receivers with the same caliber talent, has that same kind of, I guess, mix with everybody, that maybe he will succeed. But hey, maybe he comes back. It's just a go around. It's a merry-go-round, a Ferris wheel that never stops.
And that's why you maintain relationships.
Exactly, relationships
it's the right
are
thing to
key.
do, but also from a business standpoint, it's a smart thing to do. We appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. We got about 60 people watching us right now. So most of you are watching, I believe, on Twitter, on X, which is great. But we're here every Tuesday on our recruiting channel that we just launched here in the last couple of weeks, thanks to LeeAnn. So we've launched this recruiting channel here at the Voice of College Football. And here you can engage with us. You can comment in the chat. We will read your comments and questions. So please join us here on YouTube. The link should be right there on X. So just to pull back the curtain, everyone, and show you what goes on here at the Voice of College Football. So LeeAnn sends me, she's in charge of all the intel. She's the brains of the operation. I think it's pretty obvious that I'm the looks of the operation, but she's the brains of the operation, just to let everyone know. And so you really need to follow her on Twitter. Do you say Twitter or X? You're a Twitter girl.
I still say Twitter, but I know some of my recruits, they call it X. They call it Twitter X. I haven't found that balance yet. So I call it both, just kind of, but I mostly just call it Twitter because sometimes that's how I am. But yeah, no, follow both of us. Like I said, it takes a village. Like I said, like Mark says, recruiting is about relationships. I'm really lucky that we have a lot of coaches and high school staff on the college level, as well as on the high school scene, who have been so welcoming their families, to helping us follow their children's journeys, their sons' journeys, invite us into programs. We're really excited about this off season. We'll be talking a lot about 7-on-7. We'll be hitting some of the Under Armour camps, some of the 7-on-7. So like Mark said, make sure not only to catch us on the live show when we stream on Twitter, but yeah, follow in our recruiting channel, because we have a lot of exciting things planned as far as, doing one-on-one interviews. And, like I said, we're covering recruits from all across the board. So for all those specific fans, if you're Ohio State fan, Michigan fan, even at those smaller schools, leave us a comment. If there's a guy you want to hear more about or you want to see come on the show, please let us know, because we're here for you. Like I said, recruiting is all about bringing it's constantly changing, but we want to make sure that we bring you guys the guys that you want to talk about, not just the household brands and names that you hear a lot about. So if you got somebody that you're really interested in, let us know, because I'm sure somebody else is interested in them too, especially if they're super talented. So a lot of exciting things planned. Kind of a calm week for us. I'll be heading to the East and West Shrine Bowl. Obviously it's the senior season for all our guys, getting ready so they'll be spending their time between the East and West Shrine Bowl and also the Reese's Senior Bowl. So we'll be getting to see a lot of your favorite guys in their last career college game, all-star setting, similar to what we were talking about with the high school circuits. They'll be getting underway this week. So hopefully there won't be too much snow out in Jerry World in Arlington in the next couple days. We'll be bringing you from live practices, interviews from all your favorite senior guys before they head off into and prepare for the NFL. Fingers crossed, a lot of these guys, have already been training this off season in different places, seeing if they're going to get invited to the combine and trying to up their draft stock. So it'll be really exciting to see some of your favorite players at the East and West Shrine Bowl in Arlington this next week.
All right, LeeAnn, we're going to put you to work. You ready? Now, if you need to take a sip or a breath or anything, but man, you've got a lot of notes here, and this is good stuff. So everybody listen in. Here we go. There's a lot going on. Even with it calming down, there's still so much to run through. And here's a guy right off the top that obviously is one of the most coveted corners in college football, a guy that we've talked about many times out of Washington, Thaddeus Dixon.
Thaddeus Dixon is a guy that everybody wanted. There was a lot of rumblings. We weren't sure if it was going to be similar, if he was going to, join Zacharias Davis and Ephesians over and remain at Washington. Those were two talented corners that Washington was able to pick up. Or was he going to be on the move? Where was he looking? Well, speaking of Bill Belichick and UNC and really investing their money, it looks like, and Thaddeus Dixon will be heading to join Bill Belichick in Chapel Hill. We think one of the key things in this market we had kind of alluded to a couple shows ago when we are kind of seeing, we knew that there was mutual interest between UNC, obviously a visit and whatnot, but that Bill Belichick was going to do Bill Belichick things and whatnot better. Like we said, it's all about relationships. So Bill Belichick goes out there and hires a Washington DB coach, brings him on staff. So why not help lure in Thaddeus Dixon? I really think again that was a key component. Obviously the NIL, but I think that was a strong proponent in bringing Thaddeus Dixon to UNC. Again, he had tons of suitors. We thought maybe he would stay at Washington and join Takario and Ephesians as two top corners that they were able to get. But it looks like he's going to be heading to Chapel Hill.
And not only him, but of course, North Carolina looking to the offensive line position and looking for some help there in the Sun Belt Conference from Troy.
Despite the money that UNC and Corey alluded to as far as NIL, they definitely have not been quiet as far as it's money is no option, or to allude to Jermaine Dupri's song, money ain't a thing. There's definitely money ain't a thing when it comes to NIL and Bill Belichick. However, Bill Belichick really hasn't exhausted that NIL that seems to be in abundance. He's really gone to what we talked about. Most of his roster for the transfer portal has been built on FBS schools, smaller schools. So he wants to continue to build that offensive line. We've talked a lot about across the season. We talked about it with Corey Smith and NC State, how they're looking to build, and protect their quarterback. Well, Bill Belichick is doing the same thing, and he picks up a talented Troy offensive tackle, Daniel King, and he's going to be heading to Chapel Hill. So again, Bill Belichick looking to build his roster, with those unhidden gems. And it makes me wonder too, how he's approaching his high school signing class, because just kind of looking, he's really been on the move when it comes to the high school recruiting, going after the top 4 and 5 star guys. So obviously it might be interesting to see if they're going to use that NIL money, and they're going to try to kind of pour it into their young talent and develop. Again, I think the question is, will Belichick stay? As Corey alluded to, obviously, that's kind of a wishy-washy, because as much as we talk about, what Bill Belichick can bring to the program, there's also that means, especially with the younger guys who are looking to start, and more importantly, looking to develop, that UNC can kind of be one of those things. It looks good from afar, but in the long run, there's a lot of questions if Bill Belichick will stay. But again, I'm interested to see if UNC is going to take a lot of that money as far as the NIL, and they're going to invest it, because again, a lot of the offers, like we said, are going out, and he's definitely not wasting time putting in the offers for 4 and 5 star talents that we've heard about. And some of the guys we'll be talking about, later, that, really are feeling a big push from Chapel Hill and Bill Belichick to come play for the 26 class and even the 2027 class. So really interesting to see if they're going to, obviously build on the portal, but another big thing, are they going to use that money and they're going to go invest it on building that foundational roster? And is it going to start with young talent, elite young talent, and blue talent? Because there's one thing, the recruiting cycles always kind of shift as far as the high school, but man, this 2026 class and 2027 class is extremely talented. Some of the names that you've probably heard us mention are going to be mentioned, later today. But this 2026 class, from what I've seen across the All-American circuit and what I'm seeing continue, man, extremely productive. And these guys, a lot of them really look like they're college ready. So in Bill Belichick's mind, I think too, he's going to go try to pluck those guys that he knows that's top talent and possibly try to invest it. So it's going to, like I said, it's going to be really interesting to see if NC if UNC is going to use that money to be able to, build foundational talent and, make some big time signees in that 2026 class and that 2027 class. But a lot of exciting things definitely happening despite the contracts not being signed, despite all the rumblings.
A guy that should be ready for the SEC after a productive season at Duke is Star Thomas, who's moving on to Knoxville.
Yep, he is. He's going to be a Bull. He's going to be a Bull. And Star Thomas, I mean, if that's not a running back name, he's broken all sorts of records. He definitely was a staple. So again, the Bulls were suffering in the wide receiver room trying to get that momentum, and they definitely hit the portal this season to try. But getting the addition of Star Thomas is really going to help their run game and their ground game. Obviously, we've seen, especially in the SEC, in some of the critical moments and some of the critical playing, especially in the red zone, just what a difference having a strong run game and running back depth can do. And I think Star Thomas is definitely going to be that addition for the Bulls run game, and hopefully get that ground game going and build upon that after a big loss in the wide receiver room for the Bulls.
I got to say that I was aware of Deshaun Purdy. I knew of him. I'd seen him play a little bit. Of course, he was at Charlotte, but I learned a lot from you, LeeAnn, about Deshaun Purdy and your scouting of him a few years ago, and now he's made his decision.
Yeah, this is another interesting one. Talk about the quarterbacks in a merry-go-round, in a Ferris wheel from the high school circuit to the transfer portal. Deshaun Purdy, like I said, you can see a lot of talent at Navy All-American Combine. He's one of the kids that I scouted a couple years back before, really under the radar. Again, I was really surprised why he hadn't had more offers. He ultimately, like you said, was committed to Charlotte, and then enter the transfer portal after a short time there. Really young, fresh talent. It was no surprise when Florida was recruiting him, when he came available. We've seen what Florida's been able to do with DJ Lagway, another name that you've heard me talk endlessly about, who's another kid who's really translated and really taken Florida to its next step. They were looking to bring him in. But again, like we say, in the world of recruiting, things are constantly evolving, changing, and it looks like he will be flipping his commitment after signing with Florida to, come on to help create some competition and be kind of the backup guy to build strong depth for DJ Lagway. It looks like instead he's going to be hitting back to the ACC, and he's going to be a Dean Deek and is joining Wake Forest as their next quarterback to build on.
I would not want to be in some of these administrative offices processing the paperwork when a guy makes a transfer and then changes his mind like 48 hours later, like we saw with Jonte Cook, Texas to Washington, and then see ya, I'm headed somewhere else at this point. All right, next up, Amari Niblack is a guy that I've watched a lot. 2 huge stops, obviously, being both a Bama and a Texas player at tight end. And now he's made his decision.
Exactly. Like he has made some stops in big programs, so definitely he brings experience. Not a lot of playing time, but again, he's exhausted his eligibility at Texas, and now he's looking to not go too far from home, joining arch rival in College Station and the Texas A&M Aggies. So again, this will be a Texas A&M with a nice pickup in Amari Nickelback. Again, SEC experience. I think he will have no problem, obviously, with the departure of Donovan Green heading to LSU from Texas A&M. This was definitely in an area that Mike Elko was looking to pick up as far as the tight end. I think they're going to have a nice addition. He's going to be a nice depth piece, and I think he'll be very productive. Again, again, with the kind of SEC experience that he brings, obviously at Alabama for 2 seasons and with a short time at Texas, I think it will be a good fit for him down in College Station.
All right, we keep moving down the list, and we go to Ole Miss. Builds another top wide receiver. Okay, this is probably the biggest addition we saw over the weekend because Trey Wallace had done some nice things, obviously, at Penn State and was one of their leading guys, and now he is headed to the SEC.
He is. We know that Lane Kiffin and his offense, they sure do know how to develop wide receivers, and you can never have too many wide receivers, just like you can never have too many running backs down in Oxford. Trey Wallace, former Penn State standout, is heading to Oxford, and he will be joining Ole Miss as part of that wide receiver room. Of course, the wide receiver, really, Lane Kiffin has done a fabulous job this offseason as far as bringing in some top transfer portal wide receivers, and I think that Trey Wallace will be an excellent addition and definitely will be something that they can build upon. I think he'll be another instant impact player. I think that's what makes a receiver like Trey Wallace so attractive, is the fact that they're experienced. But like what Corey was saying, nowadays, you want somebody that you can kind of step into. And a lot of these guys that, look at his experience at Penn State after, 4 seasons, he's been productive. He's been a consistent, and that's a lot of times we don't talk about. Sometimes players don't have the opportunity wherever they stop to be able to, make their way or make their mark. But, a kid like Trey Wallace has definitely made his mark, and he's been consistent. And I think that consistency is something you can build upon, and definitely, which that he brings experience and talent. I think he's going to bring a nice addition. I think he's going to bring something new to the wide receiver room because he's a non-SEC. He's a non-SEC guy. I think sometimes, when we get those out of conference talents, they bring a new dynamic. They bring something different because they've been playing in a different conference. It's almost kind of like that X factor. So it's going to be interesting to see just what kind of role Trey Wallace will. But I think it's going to be a nice fit for Lane Kiffin and continuing to build that signature depth in that wide receiver room from the portal.
And to that point, Keandre Lambert-Smith, who was starting wide receiver at Penn State, had a nice career there, transferred to Auburn, turned out to be, well, you could argue, Cam Coleman, the more explosive, high-ceiling receiver, but the more dependable guy turned out to be Keandre Lambert-Smith from Penn State. And just to clarify, if you were not entrenched in Penn State football, but maybe you caught a couple games and you might be a little bit confused, he goes by Trey Wallace. He also goes by Harrison Wallace. That's his official name. And so during the broadcast, they were kind of interchangeable, whether it was Trey Wallace or Harrison Wallace the third. But just to clarify there. All right. And then we've got an offensive pickup along the line for, I believe, Kentucky.
Kentucky has been looking this entire offseason again. Mark Stoops has been going in there trying to build, that Jekyll and Hyde that Kentucky, they've just had so much promise, but haven't quite been able to figure out what works and what doesn't work. But one of the things they definitely have been looking to bolster is that a unity, that camaraderie in the trenches, and they've already picked up an offensive lineman earlier in the transfer portal, but they have a nice addition in one of the top guys as far as the offensive front in New Mexico State, Shiaz Pete. I think he's going to be an excellent addition, and I think that he comes to the Cats really going to be a central part of being able to provide that protective front that was very much lacking and couldn't be, that wasn't consistent all the way through. Like we said, on the defensive side of the ball, Kentucky definitely have sparks. They will definitely forever be remembered in Ole Miss fans' history for the guys who helped, who stopped us from getting the playoffs and so forth. But again, Kentucky, despite the talent that it's had in its bolster, we saw a lot of their guys be high commodity, players in the transfer portal. They just haven't found a way. If you're a Kentucky fan or you're like me, who's covered Kentucky, from Joker Phillips to now, that it's a very Jekyll and Hyde. There's a lot of talent there, but Mark Stoops just really hasn't found a way to be able to make it click consistently. So I think this rebuilding and making the offensive and defensive lines a priority down in Lexington. There was so much hype coming into last year's transfer portal roster that he was able to build. There was a lot of top talent that he was able to build. So I think this year they're kind of regressing and really hoping that they can really find some playmakers versus having a overly hyped transfer portal. And hopefully in this round of the transfer portal, if they get it right and these players will actually translate and really help build a team. But again, I think this is a great building block to be able to rebuild these offensive and defensive fronts in New Mexico State. Shiaz Pete.
So this just came down since we've been on the air. Of course, Ohio State and Notre Dame playing in the national championship game. So those players, many of them stayed with their teams throughout the entire process of the playoffs. And now we're seeing the floodgates open and maybe the most prominent for Ohio State is backup quarterback Devin Brown. Now, he was good enough to take the quarterback battle right down to the wire with Kyle McCord in 2023. As you can see right there, he was a top 50 recruit, and he's moving on to Cal. LeeAnn, we've talked so many Cal quarterbacks over the last couple of weeks, Chandler Rogers and Sagapulatelli. I don't know who's there and who's not at this point. Of course, Fernando Mendoza left to go to Indiana, so it appears as though Devin Brown would be in line to be the next starter. And you also have some Ohio State transfer portal news.
Well, with Ohio State and Notre Dame, as we know, concluding in the national championship, it also gives the opportunity for players who are interested in the transfer portal. I believe they will have 5 days in order. This one just was like swifter than flash when it went down. Ohio State edge Mitchell Melton didn't waste any time. He hit the portal, I believe, within less than 24 hours. He was committed to Virginia, so he'll be heading, and he will be a Cavalier joining the ACC. So Ohio State edge Mitchell Melton heading to see if he can make things happen in the ACC with UVA.
All right, LeeAnn, my favorite part of the show. And if I've got my bass voice with me today, it comes and goes. So we got the rumblings here with a Montana State running back.
Yeah, there's not too many rumblings going on. Like we said, the portal officially closed, well over a couple of weeks ago, but there's still a lot of action going on. Obviously, we'll see what kind of turnover that Ohio State and Notre Dame will have as far as, their current portal situation after concluding with the national championship. But there's always something to go down, even though with the winter portal closing. Montana State running back Scottree Humphrey has been one that has been in the portal, I believe, since the 8th of January. So he's been in the portal, kind of resonating, laying low. But again, another star quarterback, running back that everybody's been looking at. UNC seems to be the place where we're hearing that he's really having, kind of where he's leaning towards. But Boise State, Ole Miss, West Virginia, and Virginia Tech are also some of his top schools. So, he kind of narrowed it down to those top schools, but we're hearing that UNC is kind of the guy to be. Obviously, I don't know how much Ole Miss will be in the mix after. Obviously, we know that they've picked up two top running backs recently, so we're not sure if Kevin Smith is going to look to add a fourth transfer portal running back. But again, he's shown interest in Ole Miss. But right now, it looks like UNC is after the highly touted Montana State running back. He was All-American. He led Montana State in the FCS championship. He had 1,386 yards, 16 touchdowns in over 15 games his entire season, averaging 7 yards per carry. In 2024, he broke Troy Anderson's single season program record. So again, he's a playmaker. As a true freshman in 2023, he ran for 441 yards, 8 touchdowns. So if we're talking about production and a big playmaking ability, Scottree Humphrey's definitely had it. And we've seen all season long, as far as this winter portal, that the FCS running backs have really made a splash and have been a high commodity. And again, Scottree Humphrey, he's kind of been laying low, but again, wherever he goes, and we're hearing that it looks like Chapel Hill, but again, the other schools are in the mix, obviously, but wherever he's going to go, I have no doubt that he's going to be a star addition and continue. Again, over 2 seasons as a true freshman, going into a sophomore season, he's going to bring a lot, obviously, to the table, and brings a lot of years of eligibility, which is also, got to be enticing when you want to bring him on, because again, it's really rare to get a guy that's that productive as a true freshman and as a sophomore, even at the FCS level, and then be able to bring him on to continue that role. I mean, with a program that probably wherever he goes, definitely is in a program where he'll have more opportunity. But again, the All-American running back out of Montana State definitely is looking at 6 schools, but we're thinking that what we're hearing is UNC and Bill Belichick is the school to beat.
Okay. We talked Penn State wide receivers in the last couple of weeks. Kyron Hudson came from USC to Penn State earlier in the show, of course, with Trey Wallace. And Amari Evans is a guy that saw spot playing time for Penn State, caught 21 passes, and he's staying in the Big Ten, but not what we think of the Big Ten being, one of those new teams in the Big Ten.
He is, and he went and he was looking at Washington. That was one of the places, obviously, that's been a hot topic, a bit a hot destination for portal comings and goings. But he's out of Colleen Shoemaker, out of high school. And what the school that we're hearing that really has the edge is Texas Tech. So it looks like he's really going to go, back to his roots right now. They seem to be the heavy favorite. Another school to watch in his recruitment, obviously, would be Syracuse. So that's another school that's been heavily recruiting. We're also hearing that Texas has been also looking at him as well. So again, Amari Evans. He led Penn State in yards per catch, 19.8. He had 8 deep receptions, and then 300 deep receiving yards, and he was extremely explosive and had 5 touchdowns during his time there. So again, he's another guy that hasn't had a lot of time, but every time that he's been able to make a splash, he really, does make a splash and has been a consistent in that Penn State roster. But again, Colleen Shoemaker out of Colleen Shoemaker High School in Killeen, Texas, looking to maybe go back home to Texas. Texas Tech and the Red Raiders. We know what they've been able to build as far as what they could offer him as far as NIL. That's another program that we don't talk a lot about, but Texas Tech really has been kind of one of the innovators when it comes to NIL and collectives as far as being able to entice players. They built a quite a roster, from the transfer portal, and they're possibly looking to add, with Amari Evans. But again, Syracuse and obviously Steve Sarkisian in Texas are looking, to bring his in-state talent and bring some depth to that wide receiver room, especially, with the exitings of, several players, Jonte Cook, who really didn't find his time despite his talent for his place at Texas. So again, Amari Evans looking to possibly head to Texas Tech, fresh off a visit to Washington. So that's another recruitment we'll be watching closely. And as soon as we get some more intel, we'll let you know.
So, of course, I'm disappointed that the Polynesian Bowl trip couldn't be put together, because I can be an excellent recruiting assistant if I've got the right incentives, but maybe some other time. So, but you've got a ton of intel coming in from Hawaii and what happened there over the last week.
Yeah, next year we'll definitely mark that on our calendar. But it was a close one between Team Makai and Team Maku, 28-21. But Team Makai and their 2025 signees and 2026 rising stars, it went down to the wire. Team Maku was trying to come back, but an interception pretty much killed their hopes. So again, it was another Friday night edition that ended from the NFL Network. This was the last mark of the All American circuit games that we get to see some of these guys. Of course, the 2025 signees, some of them were heading off to go be early enrollees at their prospective universities, and some were returning, obviously, to their high schools to finish out their senior season and prepare this offseason to their next college destination. Again, what we've seen a lot in these All-American Bowls and the All-American circuit this past season that I really enjoyed and I think was a great addition was allowing the 2026, the rising seniors, to also make their mark. So it was it's been a great 3 weeks of being able to evaluate talent for the 2026 class. Some we see a lot already are committed to programs, and some that are still kind of, trying to narrow down. So this was a great these bowl events, especially the All-Star Games, the Polynesian Bowl was the last run of the All-American circuit. But again, some of the guys that, if you are an Oregon fan and you got to be excited about Dakari and Moore. All I got to say is when it comes to him, he's advertised. He's a kid out of Duncanville. Man, I've watched him all season in hand. He was one of Keelan Russell's favorite targets. And what comes to mind is that song that just says, "Give me more, more, more," because Oregon Ducks, you're definitely going to be seeing more, more, more of this elusive wideout. He is productive. He makes things happen. Great pass catching ability. I mean, he's something that I think he's going to. I think he will make a run, and he will be some kind. I think he will play a role, possibly as a true freshman at Oregon. He's just that explosive, and I think that his skill set has him ready for the collegiate level. And he definitely showed out. like you said, according to On3, he's that five. He's got that. It's not just 5-star anymore, Mark. If you're a 5-star plus, you are that extra. And again, Dakarian Moore is definitely that 5+ extra every time he touches that ball, and he's going to find ways to make things happen.
I
Another
watched it.
guy.
I
Oh
was just
no,
going to
go
say,
ahead.
I'm sorry. I watched that reception like 8 times, and I still can't believe it. It was pretty amazing what he did right there. Is that a LeeAnn-ism, this 5-star plus guy, or is this a real thing?
No, this is a real thing now. On3 has done that. So now On3, when they do their rankings, of course, 247 has their 5-star, but On3 now does that if you are a 5-star, and then now they have a 5-star plus. So that's that kid that is just extra. And Dakarian Moore is definitely extra. And he's Mr. Consistent. He's not just a flashy star. He's productive. He's on the thing all year long. He's been one of Keelan Russell's favorite targets at Duncanville. Obviously, Duncanville didn't get it back to the state title, but man, what a run they've had all season. And Dakarian Moore, if you're an Oregon Duck fan, get excited about him, because I think that he could very well come in and get some early reps as a true freshman if they don't redshirt him, because again, it would be a waste not to put him, because when he gets somewhere, he's explosive. He makes those exciting catches. And again, he just is very elusive when it comes to being able to shift, and he creates a lot of chaos for some of those defenders. Very good at being able to not let them get in his way. So again, Dakarian Moore at Oregon was one of the guys that was really a bright spot at the Polynesian Bowl. Another guy, since we've been talking about QBs and that Cal situation, the Cal QB room must definitely look to be building depth, because they are taking quarterbacks from all sorts. And home state QB Sagbatelli has a bright future at Cal. While his team didn't get it done, he was very productive, and he really showed a strong arm. Obviously, he's a lefty, but he definitely was put on display and showed and proved why he set all sorts of records in the state of Hawaii. So I think Cal is in good hands. Again, another guy that we talked about, spent a brief stint committing to Oregon, was recruited by Cal initially, ended up going to Oregon, didn't stay there very long, and is back on the Cal train. But again, Cal is definitely looking to beef up its quarterback room, like we mentioned earlier with their quarterback additions. They definitely are going to have an interesting competition as far as where they go. But again, Cal quarterback, true freshman coming in is going to be something to watch. So I think he's a nice depth piece and definitely will create some competition in that Cal quarterback room.
And of course, you're not going to miss the offensive linemen. You're going to make sure that we don't miss them. And there's a couple of top-notch guys. David Sanders, of course, was highly coveted, as was Mikhail Fauci.
Yeah.
How do you pronounce his first name?
I say it Mikhail Fauci, but some people say it. So I hope that we got that right. If you're listening or tuning in, Fauci, I hope that we got it right. Or if not, just send me a message and we'll correct that. But anyway, like I said, these are 2025 guys. These are the names that I just ran through. Were some of the 2025 guys that are wrapping up their career, heading out. But again, I think there was a lot of productive quarterbacks from the 2025 class and the 2026 class. I'm not talking about all of them, but what I'm saying, a lot of these guys could not be as productive as they were in this Polynesian guy, especially with these two guys, Tennessee signee, like we said, David Saunders, highly coveted, big guy coming off the bus, and Mikhail Fauci, from Oklahoma. So these guys, obviously, both heading to the SEC. I almost said Big 12 because I still look at Oklahoma and think Big 12 before I think SEC. So apologize to all my Sooner fans out there. But again, you definitely are going to be in good hands with these 2025 guys up front. Were really productive, especially at the tackle position. They really didn't allow anybody on that defensive front to get past, so their quarterbacks could be productive for both sides. So again, these are two exciting guys that really stood out for me as far as the 2025, offensive guys, in David Sanders Jr. and Michael Fauci.
All right, we will keep it rolling for 2026, and some of the guys that you're looking at include a guy that we've talked about here a number of times, Deuce Geralds.
Deuce Geralds is I mean, he is just a massive entity when it comes to it. He is an athlete in my eyes, even though he's a defensive lineman. He's definitely quick for his size. He continues to create all types of chaos in the trenches on that defensive front. He didn't let anybody get through those lines when he was put on the thing. Of course, obviously, Deuce Gerald's Ole Miss legacy. So Lane Kiffin and his staff and Pete Golding have definitely been putting the overtime work to be able to hope that they can get him there. But there's a lot of other SEC schools in the mix. He made the All American. He made the Polynesian Bowl MVP along with Dakari and Moore. Well deserved. Another quarterback that I didn't mention, but we put him up there was Houston Longstreet. He's a 2026 kid. He will be one to watch. He was very productive. Has a great deep ball. All sorts of things. So there's guys that made the Polynesian MVP, rightfully so. But again, Deuce Gerald's created chaos all weekend down in Honolulu. He's going to be exciting to watch. He already is elite. He just has it when you see him. Speaking of blue chip guys, let's just move on to the bunch since while we're watching some film. Maryland, Zion Ali. He's a kid that's been on the radar and the voice and the breath of so many programs. Again, he was one of the edges I really liked from 2026, and he was really explosive during this Polynesian Bowl from what I watched. He's obviously committed to Maryland, but don't be surprised. There's plenty of suitors that are looking to try to flip him. He is a 2026, another highly sought and coveted edge. He was really tough to block off the edge all night long. I don't think there was any instance when he took the field where he was not creating chaos. Again, a really, 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 explosive kind of edge, really difficult to block, all night long. So again, Zion Ali really caught my eye in the Polynesian Bowl, committed to Maryland. So that's another one to watch. But again, this was a great way, I think, to evaluate, the 2026 class because they are on the clock, they are on deck, and a lot of obviously these guys have been making the rounds. They've been going from Under Armour to Navy All American to Polynesian Bowl, and then some of these guys were even leaving Honolulu to go, hit the 7-on-7, which we're going to be talking about here in just a second.
Yeah, and obviously Tristan Keys is a guy that I wouldn't be surprised if you told me that he was one of those 5-star plus guys.
He needs to be. If I believe he's already a 5-star, but if he's not, he will get that 5-star plus. But even if he doesn't get it, that is just a kid who has been all over the circuit. He showed out at the Under All American Bowl. He did not make it to the Navy, and then he jumped on ship, made his way to Honolulu to the Polynesian Bowl. Him, Tristan Keys, and Aaron Gregory, Texas A&M commit, were the favorite targets all night long. And both those gentlemen have all the right moves. Obviously, Tristan Keys is another kid that Ole Miss and a lot of SEC kids are looking at, out of Hattiesburg, Mississippi. He's a kid that's been really kind of under the radar, but as he's made the circuits this past season from camps last summer, he's really just taken off. And then like I said, when you see him in action, he's become one of the favorite targets. Aaron Gregory is just one of those kids I've talked a lot about out of, Douglas County, Georgia, Texas A&M commit. I've had the opportunity. Obviously, he was at the Navy All-American Bowl. Jumped on a flight, that Saturday to make it to Honolulu. By Sunday, he was another really productive player. Has a lot of upside, and I think is going to be something to watch this season. But again, the Polynesian Bowl, we've officially wrapped up that All-American circuit after 3 weeks. The 2025 class is saying adieu to their high school careers, heading off, as early enrollees or finishing out their senior years, preparing for their college life. And the 2026s, Mark, they are definitely on the move because some of these names we just talked about, they were in Honolulu finishing up, but then hitting the plane to South Florida to open one of the biggest 7-on-7 tournaments of the weekend.
And speaking of which, I know that the thing you don't like about the 7-on-7s, obviously the offensive line don't show up, but it's still a valuable scouting camp for coaches to check these guys out and the best on the best. And we start with a guy that you've talked about and informed us about quite a bit the last couple of weeks, Key Henderson.
Well, as we wrapped up the All-American Bowl circuit and everything, again, these guys were quickly like we got to see Keyshawn Henderson, Kai Henderson over at the Navy All-American Bowl. Obviously, he showed out in that lone winning touchdown, um, into the end zone and made things happen and ultimately a victory for the West. This is a kid that in the high school circuit as far as Texas has been well known, but very similar to DJ Lagway, very similar to Keelan Russell. They kind of just been hidden in the trenches. I always find it interesting when a kid like Kai Henderson, who we've seen a lot, obviously he's committed and locked in. And he can't stress that enough to Willie Fritz and the Cougars over at Houston. And Houston's going to be their damnedest to keep them because rightfully so. This is a kid who's just he started a revolution. It just took that one moment that he really had at the Navy All-American Bowl, really having a national stage to be able to prove. And he didn't get a lot of playing time this weekend in Miami. Of course, for those who aren't familiar with the 7-on-7 circuit, there's different companies, Battle, Pylon, and we'll be reaching some of those. The OT7 circuit, where all these guys are joining their teams in an all-star setting. If you're talking about an all-star setting, these are the cream of the crop, on these national teams traveling. And this weekend was the first big national 7-on-7 hosted by Battle in Miami, and Kai Henderson was there. His team was eliminated after the first day, but again, this is a kid that is really a true athlete. He's played wide receiver, he's played multiple defensive positions, but this kid is stuck on being a quarterback, and he's really made it his mission. This off season and heading into the spring season to show why he's athletic enough and why he's going to be a quarterback. And he definitely showed it this week, even though it was limited time. He was really finesse and he had a beautiful throw with his touch. I mean, I couldn't stress it enough in the Navy All-American Bowl. His deep ball was just something to watch. It's just something, it was like a symphony. And that was just before he even hit game time. When he hit game time, he was making plays. So again, Keyshawn Henderson, even though his team was eliminated first day, he was still one of those players. He was a top performer in day one. And rightfully so. Like I said, with his signature Davy Crockett hat, he's definitely making moves. He's definitely made my boys fans watching his film. They want to get Davy Crockett hats and be like Kai Henderson. I hope they don't turn to Houston fans, but I would allow them to turn to Houston fans just because of Kai Henderson. Again, we know that he's locked in with Houston, but some of his recent offers, that when Bill Belichick got on his film that it wasn't going to take a matter of time. UNC obvious is one of his recent offers. Ole Miss finally got in the mix and recently offered him following the Navy All-American Bowl. And we're hearing that Auburn is also very, very interested. They've also put down the offer. So Hugh Freeze, Bill Belichick, and Lane Kiffin are really taking to this quarterback that we knew had a lot of talent. Obviously, Houston has got to see that talent firsthand. He's out of Legacy Sports and Science School right there in Houston, so they're looking to keep his talent. But again, he's been on the circuit. He has had no time to rest, and I'm sure they're enjoying that snow down in Houston. But I'm sure he's wishing for that Miami weather. But again, Keyshawn Henderson is a household name. He's finally got his national stage to show everybody, but with those on the Texas scene have been watching him do for some time. So again, he's making quite the case for him that he definitely not only can be an exceptional athlete in the receiving core on the defensive side, but he can hold things down in that backfield, being the signal caller. So he was another great one to watch this weekend.
As well as a certain running back out of Chaminade that you've kept your eye on as we go through the list here.
Garrett Cooper was another standout name. You'll definitely, if you haven't heard about him, you'll hear a lot more about him out of Chaminade Madonna in Florida. He's just been coming off the radar. I mean, he's got the size, he's got the strength, he's got the speed. And he just makes things happen. We're looking at him with his team over the weekend. So again, Derek Cooper definitely has got that extra running back build. If you're seeing him and you're looking at him, I mean, he doesn't look like the stereotypical running back, but he definitely brings the physicality. Very much like a Shakai Mills Knight that you saw me talk a lot about. They don't almost look like running backs. They look like they could play a defensive end, a tight end because of their height and their physical build. So again, another physical running back in Derek Garrett Cooper had a very productive weekend with his team out in Miami, battle 7-on-7. So he's definitely going to be one to watch. It a lot of teams are going to be look after, and we look forward to bringing you more about this talented running back.
Every time I see the athlete designation for one of these recruits, it's typically, is he going to go defensive back? Is he going to go wide receiver? More recently, I've seen tight end and outside linebacker. So what do we know about Amari Johnson?
Amari Johnson, a Mississippi kid. He's another kid that really was under the radar. I've been watching him obviously for some time. Ole Miss has been, in the mix with him. But as far as Mississippi schools, he's really taken a liking to Mississippi State. His recruitment is really heated up. When he's, again, a lot of these kids that, are really rising up the ranks. It just took that one moment, that perfect stage. And Amari Johnson, much like Keyshawn Henderson, kind of had his moment this last past offseason, hitting those Under Armour camps, hitting those summer camps and really catching the eye and really kind of set his stock, this off season heading into his senior season. So again, we're not sure where he's exactly going to be, but again, he's being recruited in a lot of different areas. But it seems like Mississippi State, as far as the in-state schools, obviously he's at Jackson Academy. He's at Jackson Academy right now in Mississippi, but he will be an interesting recruitment to watch, like you said, when they have that marking athlete, where they're going to go. And a lot of times, like in the case of Keyshawn Henderson, so many other schools that were recruiting him, that were big time programs, weren't recruiting him as a quarterback, and that kind of turned Henderson off. And when Houston came in, they came in with the right time and the right words, because they wanted to recruit him as a quarterback where he wants to play. So in a lot of the time, we see these situations where athletes may be athletic or extremely talented in one position, but that might not be the position they want to play or flourish. So again, Amari Johnson will be one of those similar players. But again, a lot of schools looking after him, and Ole Miss is in the mix, but Mississippi State seems to be the home state favorite when it comes to Amari Johnson. But again, another big showing by him this weekend at Miami Battle.
And Zachary Cooper out of Duncansville is a guy that you're watching, as well as a few quarterbacks.
Zachary Cooper, another kid that I got to watch some this season in person. Again, he can do it all. He's extremely talented, extremely speedy. And he had another good showing with his team out. Again, this is the first one off the season. And remember, these guys are not playing. A lot of them are playing with their same teammates that they play with in high school. But a lot of these guys, this is like an all-star compilation. You have teams that are based out of a certain area, certain state, but the guys that they have on their roster could come from out of state, other programs. So this is really like the elite of the all-star, when you get all the best talent, all the rising talent. So if you're a recruiter, if you're a media guy like us, going into scout talent, this is like the mecca of being able to do this all season long. So Zachary Cooper is one of those guys that's just really explosive. He jumps on the page. If you look at his high school film and you look at what he did this weekend, his stock is definitely rising. I think obviously a lot of in-state schools are looking to keep him in Texas, but of course, SEC schools outside of Texas are definitely looking at him as well. So another interesting recruitment that is going to be explosive. But again, Zachary Cooper out of Duncanville, a nice showing this weekend at Miami.
Absolutely. And again, this is a quarterback that you're looking at in Miami this week. Briggs Cherry, is that his name?
Briggs Cherry. And I actually got turned on to Briggs Cherry as far as being able to watch his film, thanks to Ole Miss signee Shakai Mills-Knight, because he was that was his quarterback. That was one of his quarterbacks out at the Baylor School in Tennessee. The Baylor School has done an excellent recruiting, kind of bringing in this interesting talent out to play in Tennessee. And Briggs Cherry definitely is a stock riser at the QB position. He's definitely kind of getting his footing. A lot of guys, like you said, we talked about Longstreet was another QB that's catching his eyes, but Briggs Cherry's is not so far behind. He was playing out with the Coastline All-Stars this weekend, and man, I think that every time that I was watching clips and you got to see him, this kid was in the end zone throwing a touchdown. He's just one of that guys. He was putting up numbers left and right all weekend long in Miami. and he's just very accurate. And I think that when it comes to his deep ball, that's kind of been his signature staple as far as accuracy. And again, he's just one of those quarterbacks that is just consistent along the board. He's productive. He can put up numbers. I mean, talk about throwing dimes. He definitely can do it, and he's consistent across the board. But again, I think his signature thing that has really been appealing outside of all the other things that I've mentioned is that deep ball accuracy he has. There's just something about it every single time. I don't think he ever falters, even under pressure. And he did that, and he continued that this weekend with the Coastline All Stars down in Miami.
And of course, Tristan Keys is going to show up and he's going to ball out. But there's a string of pass catchers that you're looking at.
There are. Before we get into those guys, Tristan Keys definitely deserves the award for being able to be the playmaker of the century. And I'm not just talking about making plays on the field. He does that everywhere he goes. But this kid hopped on from, one All-American game to another. He was at the Polynesian Bowl. He went from Honolulu to make it down to South Florida to compete with his team the very next day, in that weekend. So again, Tristan Keys is a playmaker out of Hattiesburg, Mississippi. Of course, all the in-state schools are looking to keep him. He's a high riser, but again, this is a field that you gotta love because you can see a lot of talent. Tristan Keys is a name that we definitely talked about, but there's a lot of other guys that really caught my eye as far as the pass catchers go. Willis High School's Jermaine Bishop. He's a guy that I've seen throughout this season. Been very productive for Willis. He's also labeled as athlete, but really got his bread and butter, during that run that Willis made in the playoffs. Very talented. Ethan Booby Feaster, DeSoto, Texas. This is a kid. He is the 2027 class. Already elite 5-star top wide receiver in the state of Texas, in the country. I was on that sideline for that exact catch, and that I was right there.
Nice.
Man, this kid, yes, this was in DeSoto. During one of their games, and like I said, I've watched Feaster all season long. He's as advertised. The kid is productive. He's elusive. He's got a tall frame. He's got exceptional range when it comes to his pass catching ability. I can't even say it enough. He's almost got like a smaller tight end build, even though he plays wide receiver. So again, 2027 class out of DeSoto, Ethan Booby Feaster with a great showing with his signature 7-on-7 Grand Elite. He definitely is elite and beyond and grandiosio when it comes to hitting the field. So he also was another one that caught my eye because, again, he's a kid that I watch all season long. Be productive when he's in. He hasn't had a lot of playing time, for DeSoto, but every time he's got in, because DeSoto is one of those places that they pretty much have their choice when it comes to running back and wide receivers who can make plays. Gerard Baker, obviously, Miles Johnson Cook is another guy that joins him. So again, this is a high school team that's one of those elite teams that really has depth. And Booby Feaster, wherever he goes, definitely adds to the depth. And he definitely was one that I had to mention, having a strong starting week out in Miami with Grand Elite in his 7-on-7 team.
LeeAnn, we can't forget the defense. We got to give those guys some love. Obviously, it's the toughest job maybe in football. We could argue that one, playing cornerback and lining up against these elite, freakish wide receivers. But you've got some guys that you think are up to the challenge.
Yeah, the first one that really came up was a corner, Naeem Richardson out of Alameda, Texas. He didn't get targeted a lot all weekend long, but every time he did, he was hurting receivers, causing chaos. He's exceptionally well when it comes to that press man coverage, Mark. He wasn't letting anybody get past that line of scrimmage all weekend long. That's one of the things that impressed me. Sometimes we see with these corners that they're really good at at protection and that press man coverage, but when you get a wide receiver who's extremely speedy or whoever they're on, they often able to get past a corner. That was not the case with Naeem Richardson out of Alameda, Texas. Again, he's going to be a rising corner to watch, definitely with a lot of pickup, and I'm excited to see what he can do on the circuit this season.
Yeah, and obviously some other ones to run down, including Tylen Wilson.
Kylan Wilson out of Pascagoula, Mississippi. He really had a nice showing at safety. Another corner that's really on the rise, Javari Flowers. You're going to be hearing a lot more of his name. He's out of Northwestern High School in Florida. He's definitely looking at some. He's definitely got Mississippi on his mind. We see Ole Miss there, State and Clemson. He continues to make quite the buzz. Like I said, Mark, he's just on the rise. And what I really like about him when it comes to what he can do is he's one of the, I call him the man in the mirror because he is excellent. I don't think I've seen a better person at his position who can really mirror a wide receiver and stay on his receivers like Javari Flowers do. And I think that's what makes him high in demand. Another thing that I really noticed off this weekend is that he's one of those guys that he sticks on glue. He really can keep the receivers in the pocket, and he's really excellent at breaking up passes at the catch point. So again, I call him the man in the mirror because I don't think I've seen anybody do a better job of being able to mirror wide receivers the way Javari Flowers has done, not only on the 7-on-7 circuit, but what I've seen from his film at Northwestern. So he's going to be an exciting one to watch.
Love the nicknames. Love the nicknames. You come up with some good ones.
Well,
And then we've got a guy. What's that?
That's how I have to remember. That's how I have to remember everybody, Mark, because I give them nicknames because that way I know that they stand out. And that way, with all the talent that we get to see, I get to remember who they are. Like, Keyshawn Henderson, he's got the Davy Crockett, and Javari Flowers, he's the man in the mirror because he's great at mirroring wide receivers. So, yep, that's how I'd be able to see for flow because I don't think I could keep up with all the talent that we get to see and that we're fortunate enough to see and scout all
Yeah,
season long.
I would be mixing up all the Richardsons and the Joneses and the Smiths and the Hendersons and the and on and on and on. Absolute. That's a good idea right there. But I wouldn't be able to come up with the nicknames either. Now, this guy, I was able to come up with a ridiculous play that he made when we're looking at Javari Flowers out of Northwestern High School in South Florida.
Javari Flowers, that's the one I was just talking about. Javari
Okay.
Flowers is the man in the mirror. He is like I said, he's been on the circuit from the Under Armour games, All-Star game. He is out of Miami Northwestern. If you guys know anything about Miami Northwestern, you know what kind of program they are and what they definitely built under there. So again, he comes from a great high school program that is really built upon. But again, this is my man in the mirror when it comes to being able to mirror wide receivers. I don't think I've seen a guy better or who has done it more effectively in this recruiting class than Javari Flowers. Again, like I said, he really helps keep receivers in the pockets and he's just an excellent corner, and he's just really great at breaking up passes at the catch point. So again, I think he has a very talented future. Javari Flowers out of Northwestern in Miami, in Florida.
All right, LeeAnn, I think that's the end of the list. It's a good thing I showed up because I don't know why you were here. You didn't do much of anything. This is LeeAnn's show. She delivers, is what I'm trying to say, folks. She definitely runs down just so much when it comes to, it's been the transfer portal over the last month. Then she's kind of phasing into, of course, back into high school football. Not that she needs to phase into it because she's full throttle on that all the time, but she's added the transfer portal, of course. She was in San Antonio last week, of course, for all the Navy All-American workouts in the game on Saturday, and she is all over it.
Well, thank you. You're too kind, Mark. But like I said, it takes a village, and it definitely takes a village for us to bring you all this recruiting information. As we get more into the season, we hope to bring players on, like we said, coaches, along with being able to break down film. If I tell Mark all the time before we go on, that is one of my favorite things, and I hope that we have the opportunity. So, like I said, leave those comments and questions, especially if there's players that you want us to look at and break down. I am really wanting to do that here soon. But like you said, our list, sometimes we get really over flooded, and we want to make sure that we give all these guys their recognitions. And we also want to bring you guys those diamonds in the rough. So we're excited to get back. Obviously, I'll be headed to the East and West Shrine Bowl coming up next week out in Arlington, and be gearing up for Under Armour camps as well as the 7-on-7 circuit to be able to bring you some of your guys' favorite, upcoming signees. in the 2026, 27, and even the 2028 class. That's always exciting to really see the young ones get in there trying to make their stage. Again, we have an exciting jam-packed show. Make sure you like, subscribe. We have locked in a date. It took us a while because the portal was just constantly moving, but come in, be locked in with us. Take your lunch break with us if you're on Central Time at 12, or have a late lunch with us as you're on Eastern Time. Lock in with us at the Voice of College Football on our recruiting channel. As always, sometimes we stream it on the national channel and we stream it on Twitter. But again, we have a lot of exciting things, talking portal, talking high school recruiting, and we'll be getting to some of these high schools here soon as they start off spring workouts and get to talk to some of your favorite players and bring interviews. So we're excited to bring you some exciting recruiting. And as always, Mark and I will be on the move. So join us every Tuesday.